Hi. So I wanted to start with a couple of pictures. This comes from a National Academy of Science report. It tells you what the data flows for a patient looked like a long time ago. That's not too bad. This is what we begin to see in the data flows in the modern healthcare system. There's twice as many entities getting data, and there's more storing, and it's more identifiable. PAMS was working in California with the Privacy and Security Advisory Board. And one of the things, and I also worked in this process, and one of the things we started to do was try to map the information flows at a somewhat more detailed level. And this gives you just an idea for e-prescribing data flow, how much crazy data flow there is. This is the lab data flow chart. Emergency department. And you can just imagine for all the different bits and pieces of the healthcare system, just how much information is flowing all the time. And this is partly why electronic health records are going to make a huge difference in terms of efficiency. But it also, I think, and so I'm sort of focusing on the more pessimistic side, shows us what we have to worry about in terms of leaks of information, things where data doesn't end up where it's supposed to be. And then also, when you start to look at these, how many of these entities really need this information? And how much do they need? And how much should they have it? So, I have the word business in red because I think that that's probably the most important word to remember when you're covering healthcare. This is big business. It's being sold the way that things are sold in the larger market. Everyone's supposed to win. It's great. It's going to be cheaper, and we're all going to be healthier. I think eventually that may be true, but I'm not sure it's going to go very smoothly at all. I think there are going to be a lot of bumps along the road, and we could see some fairly bad cautionary tales. We get a little bit of this reporting. People are beginning to see that there are doubts about efficacy. This is data from a study that by Athena or somebody like that, where they interviewed a whole bunch of doctors, and they've been doing this over the years, and doctors are questioning, again, how well this is going to work for them. Now again, keeping in mind how many players there are in the healthcare system and in the healthcare industry, the idea that there will be benefits also has to force us to ask, well, who's getting the benefits? And at what point in time? I mean, one of the reasons why we're having problems with adoption is that there are different incentives everywhere. I mean, the small practitioner, a lot of the frontline providers, they're kind of where this starts, but can they justify for themselves the immediate capital investment? And how do they individually see return on investment? So there's at one level where we might think societally, yes, there's definitely going to be an ROI, but when you break it down, if essential parties in the system don't have that investment and have that incentive now, then you're going to have bottlenecks. It's not going to grow in an organic way. And that's part of what the stimulus money was about, was to try to jumpstart some of that. We can't go into it today, but I think there are a number of people, and Pam probably could talk about this too, who think that some of the incentives ended up kind of having unintended consequences that were not actually what we wanted to have. So of course, the first rule of journalism is follow the money, and it's thought right now there's a wild, wild west out there. Again, Pam was talking about the arguments over standards, about how to do things. Well, there have been a lot of companies out there. There are a lot of companies with proprietary formats. There are vendors who have been serving particular sets of institutions and they want to keep them. Not everyone has an interest in interoperability, right? It's not like Apple from day one wanted everyone to be able to get a hold of a copy of Mac OS or anything like that. And so you have all of these economic issues, once again, that are going to be bumps on the road. I think a particularly good cautionary tale is what happened in the United Kingdom just recently. They had I believe, a £12.7 billion investment in their sort of national health system. They already have a national health system, but in the IT side of it, and they dumped it. They're still going to be pursuing more decentralized approaches, but the big one that they thought was going to put them over the edge, they ended up deciding it was a waste of money. And I highlight big international IT companies because obviously IT vendors are a big, big reason, both good and bad, for why things are the way they are. The other side of this has to be, when we spend more than $19 billion on something in the healthcare area for this kind of technology, that means we're not spending it elsewhere in the healthcare system. This is from a report that the sort of National Association of County Public Health Systems came out, and they are very concerned about not being able to meet their budgets for essential services at really sort of a ground level. And so we need to keep asking, not just should we do this, but what are we sacrificing? What are we giving up for doing it? I mean, you'll read occasionally about some really clever, cheap idea that saves lives and money, like the, what's his name, surgeon's checklist or something like that, which takes no technology almost at all, and yet has demonstrably reduced the level of mistakes in emergency rooms around the country. That's not the sort of thing that this money is going to, and it's not the sort of attitude that a lot of the super high-tech approaches, and I mean high-tech in the adjective form, really, promote. I mean, we need to keep thinking in a diverse and innovative way about how to fix the healthcare system and not just think of technology as a panacea. So, data breaches. This is, I guess, such a hackneyed subject by now that it's almost lost its impact. But the numbers are huge. And then, again, when you think about the data flows that I showed you graphics of, it's really obvious, I think, that without good security, good privacy, good rules, and a lot of good training, these are all sort of Exxon Valdez's of the privacy world waiting to happen. So, obviously I had intended to throw the pictures in later, but I decided I'd start you with them just because I like pictures. So, you've seen these, we'll skip them. Now, again, as a privacy advocate, one of the things that I frequently deal with in the healthcare arena is people really, really pushing on the we need the technology, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then they'll say, well, breaches can happen and people make mistakes, whether it's with paper or whatever, and a fax can go awry and this, that, and the other thing. I think, I think those arguments are really quite disingenuous, because you just can't make the mistakes you can with paper that you can electronically. I mean, the scale is just way greater, and it's much harder to take anything back. The other side of the money problem, or another side of the money problem, is what a lot of people are beginning to call big data. and this is a very popular phrase in the DC sort of policy environment, and it's the idea that it's not just in the healthcare area, it's a lot of different areas. You're saying, wait a minute, people's data, all of this data is a social resource that needs to be mined. And from that, and that's right in a way. There's certainly a lot of value we can get from it. But it has a tendency to sort of commoditize, objectify the individuals about that the data is about. Whereas, in my privacy and surveillance work, for years it was, the Bush administration or Dick Cheney or something like that, and a lot of sort of civil liberties concerns about government action. We're now seeing a lot of demands for data and a lot of incursions on people's privacy that come from the environmental side, that come from the health side. If you are talking about, say, congestion pricing or tracking people around the Bay Area in order to be able to charge them differently for the gas or tax them differently because of how much they drive. Well, those are all good, eco-friendly things that we like, but at the same time, it still amounts to a form of surveillance. So we have this sort of different area, and big data is now piling into there, saying that there's social benefit and that there's money to be made. An example that I like to talk about is, how many of you have heard of Henrietta Lacks? Okay, that's pretty good. All right. So, the story is really, the point I want to make with the story of Henrietta Lacks is that, yes, her cells were very valuable, and they've saved a lot of lives, but at the same time, there was absolutely no respect for her or her family, and the researchers and the industries have profited off of her and her family's genes in ways that they've never been compensated for, and without any asking. This is going to be one of the long-term stories that we're going to see variations of over and over again. Genetics, DNA, your privacy, your family's privacy, your children, anyone you're related to, right? Because when you gets to, if you talk about a cut on my finger, that's about me. If you talk about something that has to do with my genes, that's going to implicate my kids. It's going to implicate my parents. Do our traditional notions of informed consent, where you want me to consent to something, even really apply when the data about me is really data about other people? And these are a couple of, and actually if you get the electronic version of this presentation, I have URLs for almost everything that I've mentioned here.
Tell us about those cases then.
Well, I mean, both of these, the Havasupai case is was recently settled, but what it's basically about is that years ago, researchers from Arizona State University got tissue specimens from this Indian tribe. And they originally were going to look at it for diabetes research. But then what happened is that once they had the cells, they continued to go back to them and use them for research for different purposes without ever recontacting or without ever notifying the tribe. And eventually the tribe discovered this, and they had what I guess you would say cultural, a serious cultural hostility to any research being done on their tissue with regard to mental illness. This is a cultural attitude that apparently the tribe had, and they, the tribe and the university weren't able to, resolve it without going to court, and so they went ahead and sued Arizona State University, and I think the reason why they ultimately settled the case for millions of dollars was because I think that Arizona State had an actual possible liability as a result of it. The Texas case is, around the country there is a newborn blood spot screening collection program. And California collects blood spots. I suspect every state collects blood spots. In Texas, what happened was it was discovered that they sold these blood spots, which contained DNA data, and also shared them with the military. The Defense Department wanted to use them for genetic research as well. One of the interesting things in genetic research is that you want bigger and bigger and bigger genome banks, because a lot of the voluntarily submitted data is disproportionately of certain ethnic groups. For instance, a lot of the data sets, the Icelandic data set, they're skewed toward Caucasians. But there's enough evidence of population substructure variation genetically, so that what may be true for Caucasians is probably not going to be true. At least we have a reason to think that it's going to be different for blacks, for Hispanics, for Asians, et cetera, et cetera. And so there has been a drive to collect more diverse DNA information. And doing it in this way, you'll certainly get it, but you're also getting it without much consent from people. And so a number of parents sued the state of Texas and ended up, again, I think that ended up, there was a decision that went against the state, and then I think they dismissed and settled. I can't remember the exact way it worked out, but these are the kinds of litigation cautionary tales that I think that all lawyers who represent researchers in the genetic area are saying, okay, you've got to start to be careful. So I'll end with talking a little bit about patients. And we are concerned, obviously, about patient privacy, the security of patient information, the privacy of patient information. And it's not just about whatever the rules are, what the technology is or can do, right? You can have technology that's capable of encrypting everything, but if it's not done right, or if people don't actually use it, if they leave passwords on sticky notes, then things aren't really very secure. So enforcement and compliance are really, really critical. But at least during the Bush administration, this was extremely lax. The feds just really did almost no enforcement, and I think we're recovering, and it's going to take a little time to recover from that. I mean, the Obama administration has been much more focused on that. And again, the informed consent problem is something that therefore comes up in the area of obstacles to adoption, because doctors and hospitals and all institutions are saying, well, wait a minute, how do we get people to choose to have their information being transmitted electronically? This is obviously an area of great concern to Americans. This is a study that Alan Weston, who's a professor at Columbia University and a very, very well-known privacy surveyor, did just earlier this year. And these are sort of, the high-level takeaways. People are very, very concerned that when you digitize their patient data, that bad things are going to happen to it, that it's going to flow in all sorts of ways that they don't expect, and that they'll have no control over. And their big concerns are things like, gee, I've got cancer, I've got this, that, or the other thing, and I'm going to get discriminated against. Employers, obviously, also a big issue. And these are the slides you saw before. So, in summary, thank you very much. I don't like to read slides because most of my audience can read.
Let me, for someone not in California, based in California, can either of you or both of you talk about what happened at Stanford? What happened wrong? Was it one thing, or was it a series of problems?
It really did seem like a Keystone Cops kind of situation. But I mean, because it was a billing contractor's marketing agent
that got this spreadsheet of patient data.
Someone who had applied to
Well,
work for them. They
Well,
would get it.
well, and then this one-man shop marketing agent was looking for a part-time employee. Now, he didn't know, or so he claims, that this spreadsheet was actual patient data. Or if he did know, he didn't really understand that it was a bad idea to give it to a job applicant, because the idea was, here, take the spreadsheet of data and show me how you're going to analyze it. Well, what did the applicant do? The applicant had trouble with it and found a website called studentsoffortune.com. What is studentsoffortune.com? It's a website where my daughter, who's a college student, could post a request and say, I'm having trouble with my Beowulf essay. Can someone write it for me? I'll pay you $50. That's what it is. It matches, it's Craigslist for people who want help. And so she posted, this applicant posted the spreadsheet that she'd gotten from the marketing agent, which, again, she claimed she didn't know it had any sort of sensitive information. It ended up on the website as an attachment because she wanted to make sure people realized what it was that she was working on and needed help with. And so she didn't actually get any takers, and so she had to do the work herself. But in the meantime, the attachment went up in, I think, September of 2010, and it stayed there, posted on the website until August of this year, when one of the patients apparently noticed it and alerted Stanford, and then things started to remediate. But there were some serious screw-ups in this, and I don't think Stanford could be held blameless.
Well, and it's a business associate agreement. I mean, those of you who have reported on HIPAA are familiar with that term, because this was an agent acting in Stanford's behalf. The business associate.
Right, and we rely a lot on, for various kinds of data protection on BAAs, which is what we call them. The problem is, a BAA is just a contract. And so it's like saying, hey, I've got a contract with MasterCard and they promise to, handle my information a certain way, and we require MasterCard to have a contract with everyone they give it to. How does the original patient police that? How do you know that anyone's actually honoring the terms of their contract?